Back with you tonight. 3 officials from the Office of the Chief Justice have found themselves under scrutiny after resigning to join a global multimedia company which landed a tender they'd been responsible for drawing up. The company, which has been named in several reports, had just won an information and technology tender worth 225 million rand. The 3 officials reportedly joined the company the very next day after leaving office. Joining us now for more on that story is Sunday Times Investigative journalist Sabelo Skiti. Sabelo, good evening. Thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight on In Focus. So the Office of the Chief Justice saying they are taking legal advice and they will be looking into the details of what actually has happened here. That's the latest report. What are they going to find as they look into those details, according to you?
Well, good evening, Tawena. Good evening to your listeners. I think it's quite an interesting thing, actually. Firstly, the fact that they're only now sort of taking legal advice on it. But once they do that, they will realize that their own officials who worked tirelessly to, this tender is awarded, and were part of, some of them part of the people that actually made the final recommendation that Thomson Reuters be appointed here. Then went and 5 days after that award set up their own company, purpose of making sure that they are in a position to become the local partner here. The local partner here stands to make just under 63 million rand from this contract. So I think once they do, take legal advice, the legal advice is most probably going to tell them that the tender is highly irregular. I think the subcontracting, as well as some of the officials that were in charge of awarding this tender.
Yeah, apologies there, Sabelo. Your network, a little bit of a problem. Let's hope it will hold up at this particular point, but it is intermittently breaking here and there. But let's try again. So, how long was the process of adjudicating this tender that they were part of, and how long have they been in the Office of the Chief Justice?
Yeah. Yes, I'm hoping that I'm much clearer now. So these officials have been there for quite a while. All of them are seasoned individuals in that department, very experienced, very skilled, and all 3 of them had at some time in that department played particularly important roles, especially in the projects to modernize the courts, which would include this online court system as well. The adjudication period, we're not really sure how long that was, but what we do know is that the tender was issued in the second half of last year. And then once, when it wasn't even issued, Thomson Reuters were approached with the belief that they were the only people who could provide the software licenses that are compatible, with the program that the department has developed. What then happened after that is that once Thomson Reuters had come back and had said to them that, look, we do have the capacity to do this thing by ourselves, all of it, and we think we might be able to provide the service to you at this amount. Some officials within, this process then decided that actually we need to insert a local partner here. And then they went and they wrote back to them and they said to them, guys, please, you need to provide us with a local partner who will do this job. So for me, I found that to be quite interesting because the previous iteration of this contract that the Department of the Office of the Chief Justice had actually was being done by a local guy. There's a company that, was a reseller of this very same software, did the maintenance and provided support to the OCJ. But officials within the department felt that it was much more cost effective and much better if they just went to Thomson Reuters themselves. So it was quite interesting to me that, on the one hand, the department wanted to cut out the middleman. And then while they are busy negotiating the terms of the contract and basically, adjudicating what Thomson Reuters had given them, they then decide that they again want to insert a middleman. And what we do now know, of course, is that that middleman would later be a company owned by the very same officials who played a role in the award of the tender.
Yeah. So one of the officials saying that, well, speaking for the three, I suppose, says we did not approve the main tender. We might have been involved in the processes, but we were not in charge of the approval of the main tender. What do you find?
No, Tabo, it's a technicality, right? One of the individuals there is, the former chief financial officer. As the former chief financial officer, the gentleman chaired the bid adjudication committee. And what the bid adjudication committee does is that it basically makes the final recommendation. So it would sit with all the reports that have come from the evaluation guys who would have evaluated, the technical specs of the tender, and then they would have a report. And then adjudication would basically be the people that would give it one more look and then would decide based on the scoring and all of those sort of things where this thing goes.
Yeah.
Now, critically here, although technically the person who then goes and, signs the letter of award would be the accounting officer in the department, the bid adjudication committee is the most important one because it is the one that says to the accounting officer that we find that company X is suitable to do this work.
Yeah.
Now, in this instance, that bid adjudication committee, which then made that recommendation, is chaired by a person who's then going to set up a company that is going to get the subcontract here. And I also wish to sort of, point this out here because one of the things that these officials were saying to us, of course, is that it was a decision of a committee. It wasn't one individual, but you must remember that even though that committee is made up of different individuals, the CFO as chair of the BAC is not someone that they all sit and elect.
Yeah.
By virtue of being CFO, he is the most experienced, most senior, and is expected to guide the BAC. He can actually veto whatever the meeting says if he feels that they are not applying their minds correctly, because he's the most experienced, and it's by law that he chairs that committee.
Yeah.
So he would not have been swayed by anyone, to take a decision that he did not want to take. In fact, it's the other way around. By virtue of his authority, he would be able to sway the rest of that committee to take the decision that he wanted to take.
Let's talk then about ZA Square Consulting. Who are the directors? Are these three the only directors? When was this company registered?
Yeah, so the three people in question, which is Natim Mube, who was Chief Director of Court Services, Yvonne van Niekerk, who was Director of Case Management, and of course the former Chief Financial Officer, Casper Putzer, are the only people that are directors in that company. That company was formed in December 2021, exactly 5 days after that contract had been awarded to Reuters, and most probably 2 or 3 weeks before Reuters had issued its own contract, trying to find a subcontractor. And it was something that was quite interesting to me as well, is that Reuters say that this company was head and shoulders above, everyone else who had submitted a bid to be the subcontractor. But it's interesting to me because this is a company that virtually had no track record. It had just been registered. It had not traded. I would probably be willing to put my neck on the block and say it had not even bought a pen by the time it gets under the 60 million rand subcontract, to run a very sort of complex project, which would be the nationwide rollout of the system that, of course, would help modernize the courts. But one also understands that because of the expertise in that company, these being the people that not only are well versed in the Office of the Chief Justice project to modernize the courts, are of course also well versed in the needs of this tender, because they did play some role even in drawing up the specifications and the need in the OCJ.
Yeah, it's a typical boomerang effect type of situation where they always talk about it, but I think you are seeing it here at play, where you throw the boomerang from this end, resign, and you're going to catch it on the other side. Is there a regulation against that? Or is there regulation that stipulates a cooling off period?
Yes. Well, this was quite interesting. So we did go to DPSA because having sort of covered these sort of things, over a number of years. And I mean, as you say, there was even a common term for it. It was called a javelin. You would throw it here and then leave and go catch it, at the other side. So there had been legislation, but I think that legislation had then lapsed, which specifically, set out a cooling period, because there was a time, I think, in our history where this was quite, frequent, where people were doing this, on the regular. So government had come up with, legislation that did prevent this. But what I was told by the DPSA is that that specific legislation is no longer enforced. Of course, what we are looking at here as well is contraventions of the Public Service Management Act, which precludes civil servants, part of it which precludes civil servants from conducting business with the state. You know that through the subcontract, they are in a way conducting business with the state. And that contravention, could see one face prison time of, I think, up to 5 years or a fine. So I think that is probably what is likely to happen if things go the ordinary way in this particular matter.
Yeah. And the Office of the Chief Justice saying, as far as taxpayers' money is concerned at this particular point, the money is still secure, I suppose, meaning that they have not made a single payment to Thomson Reuters. Is that your understanding as well?
My understanding is the same, is that because the contract had started on the 1st of June, there had not yet been any payments, but we will be looking into it, because knowing the nature of our government, prepayments are often something that does do accompany, these tenders of these sizes.
Sabelo Skiti, I appreciate your time and for coming on this evening and keeping an eye on this one and bringing us the information there. That is Sunday Times Investigative journalist Sabelo Skiti looking at that one. Yeah, the Chief Justice Office saying at this point they will not be commenting further except to say they are taking legal advice on this particular matter and they will be gathering some information surrounding this case, which I suppose Sabelo Skiti has already started that work for them.